Hey, thank you all for coming to today's session about harnessing the power of AI/ML to drive innovation and unlocking new opportunities in your organization. So before we begin our session, let me ask you first question. How many of you believe AI/ML going to be a future, but your organization is still struggling to realize the full value of AI/ML? Great. I'm not glad to hear that, but I'm not surprised as well. And this is the real challenge. And that's why we want to share in today's session how important for you to focus on certain priorities in your organization. So first of all, with so much potential, I can tell you we have just begun to scratch the surface of AI/ML and what is possible with this technology. And there are only few organizations who are successful in actually taking the advantage of this technology and actually aligning that with their business goals. Whether you just started, began your journey, or already in the process of expanding your effort on AI/ML, in today's session, we are going to share some of the best practices and give you some actionable insights so that after this session, when you go back, you can apply that to your organization. With that, I'm Mitesh Patel. I'm Principal Solutions Architect at AWS, and with me,
I'm Rana Dutt. I'm also a Principal Solutions Architect at AWS. And I have something important to tell you, that at the end of this talk, I'm going to give out a secret word. And that secret word is going to enable you to play a treasure hunt game. And why do you want to play the treasure hunt game? Because that's going to give you an opportunity to win some cool prizes. Sound good? So just stay till the end of the talk, and I'll give out that secret word. Thanks, and back to you, Mitesh.
Thank you, Rana. So at very high level, this is the agenda we are going to cover. We'll start with some of the key challenges and approach that you want to take for AI/ML strategy. Second would be driving innovation using AI/ML and generative AI. In today's world, we cannot complete our talk about AI/ML without talking about generative AI. And we will cover some of the most common use cases so that you can start thinking about how can you apply this back to your organization. And in overview of AI/ML, I want to cover different categories, subset of AI, whether it is a traditional machine learning, deep learning, or generative AI. And after my talk, my colleague Rana will actually talk about some of the real world use cases used by some of the leading organizations. And how many of you heard about Amazon Bedrock service? Great, nice. So that's the generative AI service that we offer, and Rana will talk about Bedrock, but also how you can apply Bedrock to some of the use cases, and we will have some key takeaways. So talking about some of the key challenges in implementing AI in your organization, let me ask this. How many of you think skills and technology are the top barriers in implementing AI/ML in your organization? Great, not many hands raised. So this is based on the Gartner study. Actually, skills and technology are not the top barrier, but actually it is business and data. The reason being is, if I had asked this question to you before the cloud era, that makes sense because after the cloud, so many things have been simplified. There are so many frameworks and services, managed services available so that you can easily apply that into your organizations. So talking about business, why is that the top barrier? There are a couple of reasons, and first reason is that there are very few organizations who actually understands how that can be applied and what are the benefits of AI, right? That's one of the biggest challenge, and they don't know where and how to apply in different business units. Second is the data. So there are very few organizations where they have democratized the data in their organization. So very few organizations who have actually made the data accessible to everybody in secured manner. I don't know, but let me check. How many of you can easily identify the data in your organizations? You can quickly search and know that all this data are available, right? So that's a challenge. This is where the data strategy comes into picture. But because of these challenges, not many companies are able to actually take the advantage of that. And data quality is also one of the biggest challenges that we have heard so far. When we talk about data quality, there could be data available, but they could be sitting in different silos in your organization. It could be maybe in the databases, or maybe in some form of documents, or maybe they are not easily available for you to use that to actually run the machine learning or build the AI solution on top of that. So because of these challenges, not many companies can take advantage of that. But how can you address these challenges? As you look at this slide, many organizations actually start from the right. They start with the technology. And if you ask me, that's not a wrong approach, because when any new technology comes, you want to make sure that you can basically learn about that technology. Team is able to experiment with technology so that they understand the full capabilities of that technology, right? The problem comes when you launch the product from the technology. What happens with that approach is that when you launch the product from technology, there will be a huge challenge with the adoption of that solution, right? So if you are not able to measure the impact, then you will not actually take benefit of that technology. And there are very few organizations who start from the left, and these are the most successful organizations who start from the strategy. Once they understand the full potential of that technology, they want to make sure that they align it with the business strategies and focusing on the customer needs. And with that, they will be able to measure what would be the impact of using the solution. So this is what we always say at Amazon, is that fall in love with the problem or opportunity and not to the solution. Basically, make sure that you are not over-obsessed with the technology. While technology is a great enabler, but it is just one of the tools that enables your organizations to make the difference. So, how can you go about it? This is what we always believe at Amazon, is that you want to focus on your customer first, whether it's internal customer or external customer. You want to first make sure who is going to leverage this solution that you are building using AI and ML. Now, when you understand the customer, then what is the most single benefit that customer would get out of that solution? And why is that an important problem to solve in your organizations, right? And how that aligns with some of your top-level business goals. And those top-level business goals could be either increasing the revenue or reducing the cost or maybe capturing more market share, right? Once you start answering these questions, it will help you to understand, is it worth putting your effort and money into that initiative? So We talked about the business challenges. We also talked about data challenges. Now, once you know your customer, you are able to frame the problem statement and you know how that aligns with your top level business goal. This is the most important next step comes into picture, is identifying the data that you want to feed into that machine learning model. And this is still true with generative AI, that your data is always going to be the differentiator for any solution that you are going to build. So once you know that this is the outcome that you want to generate or some value that you want to predict, for an example, maybe you want to predict the sale, or maybe you want to forecast something in your organization, right? Once you know that outcome, then now for that outcome, what data you need to use? You need to identify that data in your organizations. And sometimes you may not have all the data available in your organization. For an example, if you want to predict the sale, in that case, that cell data could be dependent on some external factors such as weather data, right? So whole point is you have to make sure that you have all the data available so that you can feed into machine learning model training. And once you train the model, you want to test and validate before you use it into real world use case. Now, when we talk about generative AI, this is the optional step, training the model. And we will cover in detail why is that an optional step. But there will be few use cases where you want to fine-tune existing large language model, and sometimes we call it foundation model as well. So let's talk about some of the common use cases used in the industry. So this is based on the IDC study that many organizations who embark their journey into AI ML, based on the study, and also when we talk to so many customers so far, we found that either improving operational efficiency or improving customer experience or improving employee productivity. These are the top business objectives that many organizations wants to achieve using AI ML. The last one is increase innovation, which is too generic statement because with the innovation, somehow you want to align that, as I mentioned previously, how would that align with your top level business goal, right? As I said, it could be anything like increasing revenue or anything. So let's talk about some of the use cases for each of the categories. Enhancing customer experience. Talking about the use cases here, these are some of the common use cases and not the only use cases by which you can enhance your customer's experience. But the most common use case that we have seen in the industry is personalization. Because talking to many customers, what we found is they want to increase their users' engagement about their product or solution. If you have product which generates the revenue, you definitely want to increase the user engagement. And how can you increase that user engagement is through personalization. What are the likelihood that you will open on some of the links if that email or message is personalized for you, right? If you are searching for some product and if it is available at some discounted price, there are high probabilities that you want to look into that email or campaign message, right? Second is virtual assistant. Let me ask this. How many of you have made a customer service call and got frustrated with that experience? I'm one of them. The reason being is I have to wait for at least 30 minutes to get hold of any real agent. And once I get hold of that agent, I will explain my challenges, issues, and the worst part is if my call gets transferred to another department, I have to start that whole conversation from the beginning. Now, if you look at that problem statement, now you will also find the opportunity to build the solution around it. So think about the solution here. When agent takes my call, what if that agent knows my intention, why I'm calling them? And what if all the information is available to the agent when that agent is talking to me? That can significantly reduce the time which I spend with that agent. It improves my experience, but not only that, it could be a flywheel. Think about that. That same agent probably can support 4 times more call, right? That would reduce the cost of their organization. It also enhances my experience, right? So there are multiple advantages. Now, talking about boosting productivity of internal employee. And this is something I do on day-to-day basis. When I go in any meeting, and if I know that call is being recorded, I don't focus on taking the notes in that meeting. Rather, I focus my full attention on that conversation. Because at the end, I can download that transcript and I can feed that data into large language model. And I can ask the question to summarize what are the highlights, what are the next steps that we discuss, right? That saves my 30 to 40 minutes of time. And believe me, I use generative AI for my personal productivity improvement, maybe 5 to 10 times a day. That makes a huge difference because now I can spend my time on other more productive activities. Not just that, now code generation. What if your developers can deliver the product in maybe half of the time, right? Without too many bugs, that significantly makes the difference in like, okay, how many features your organizations can deliver for your customers. So based on our internal study, we have Code Whisper, which is the service based on generative AI. So based on our internal study, it improved the productivity between 50 to 60% for our internal developers. So that could make a big difference, right? So why I'm talking about all these use cases? Because we want you to think about like how to apply AI ML on your day-to-day business, right? And we truly believe that every organizations, regardless of size of the organizations, and every business unit can benefit from AI ML. Last one is optimizing business processes and improving operational efficiency. This is the most common use case I hear from multiple customers. They have data into unstructured format, and they want to extract some of the key information out of that. Either they are in financial services business or healthcare business. They want to get that data out of that so that they can take some of the business critical actions based on that. Or maybe they can automate that process. They can feed that data into their automation, right? So that reduces the manual effort. Now, talking about some of the machine learning use cases. So under the AI, there are different subset of AI. This is the most common one, traditional machine learning. So as you can see on the slide, here we are talking about predicting something, whether it is a forecast sales or maybe detecting anomalies from your probably user data, right? Or maybe you want to identify some fraudulent transaction. So here we are talking about predicting some value, or maybe you want to classify some things such as whether that email was spam email or not. So in this kind of a machine learning problem, you actually use your historical data. And let me quickly check. Do you understand these terms labeled and unlabeled data? Great, okay. Just wanted to confirm that. Labeled data is nothing but the data where you already know the outcome. Suppose in case of transactions, credit card transactions, if you know from the past credit card transactions that these are the fraudulent transactions, which means you know the outcome of those transactions, so that you can feed that data into machine learning training model so that it can learn from it. So in this case, traditional machine learning, what internally it does is, it comes up with mathematical formula when it goes through that training process, so that it can start predicting for future unseen data set. When we talk about unlabeled data, there are few use cases. Maybe you don't know what outcome to produce. So the classic example in that case is maybe you want to segment your customer base. And based on that segmentation, maybe you want to run some kind of campaigning, right? So that's the example of the unlabeled data set. Now, as you can see on this screen, here we are talking about even more complex problem. And as you can see, here we are talking about unstructured data set. Maybe you want to identify something from image or video. You want to use speech recognition. And as I mentioned before, maybe you want to extract some key information from the document, right? Document processing. Autonomous vehicle is also an example which falls into this category. So what is deep learning? It is a subset of AI. And in this case, it is an artificial neural network which works exactly like a human brains. So there are layers of artificial neuron so that information passes through this non-linear layer of neurons, and it can abstract the information out of that, so that it can start identifying some of the information, such as you may want to identify some activities from the image or video, right? So these kind of problems can be solved using deep learning. Talking about generative AI, which is again the subset of deep learning. But in case of generative AI, these models are trained on Internet of data. We are talking about not just billion, trillions of parameters. And because of that reason, it can solve even more complex real-world use cases. And how that helps. As you all probably heard about chatbot, right? So chatbot is just a user interface, but under the hood, that generative AI model, GPT-4 and new versions of a model that comes out. And it's not just like, okay, GPT is the only model available in the market, but there are multiple models from Cloud or Jurassic and Stability AI. They are available. But it can help you to augment some of the human activities, such as I mentioned before. Suppose say there is a 20, 30 page of document, and you want to summarize that document. And when you ask that question to summarize it for you, it can go through all that data, and it can summarize in a form that you expect. And I will talk about some of the tips when you work with these large language models. So if you are wondering how generative AI completes the sentence, right? So basically, generative AI is what? It generates the content. But how does it generates the content? As you can see on the screen, the sentence is, the students open there, and after that, possibilities of so many words. How does it choose the right word, right? So it's possible because of transformer architecture, which is the evolution, and its ability to learn the relevance and context of each word, and not just next to each other, but context and relevance of each word to all the words in the sentence, so that and then it can give some weightage to the words, and the word with the highest weightage gets picked up, and this is how it generates the content for you. So let me talk about some of the tips when you work with large language models, which we call it as foundation models. So if you work with foundation models, make sure you are aware about this concept called prompt engineering. This is very critical when you work with a foundation model, because it can influence the behavior and tone and style of the content it can generate. So when you work with it, make sure that you are very specific what you want foundation model to generate. Suppose say, if you want to send automated email to your customer who is maybe not happy with some of your service, you want it to write an email by providing some additional context, and maybe you want to provide some references and ask it to generate specific type of email, right? So be more specific so that you can get a model to generate a type of outcome that you expect from it. Second is, don't think about this word for now, retrieval augmented generation, but this is the technique. It helps to reduce the hallucination. What do I mean by that? This model can confidently give you the inaccurate answer, because foundation models are trained based on internet of data. They may not have any knowledge about the data for your organizations, right? And when you want it to generate the outcome, by looking at some of your internal data, such as maybe past resolution, or maybe it could be the stock information if you are in the financial industry, or maybe some of the health benefit information if you are in healthcare industry. So suppose say if you want to know what are the benefits of maybe XYZ patient, right? If you are serving in healthcare industry, this foundation model may not have that information. But what you can do, you can use this technique so that you can provide some of the content in the form of context while you ask that question to foundation model. And this technique allows you to go and look for that data, extract that data, and you can feed it into a large language model. And to do that, you need to first index the data into some of the storage, which we call vector store, so that it can go and find the right data set from the unstructured data set, and you can feed the data into this foundation model. And finally, there are very few use cases where you may have to tune the model. Because as I said, these models are not trained for your specific domains. So in case of some, maybe, let's say, insurance domain, or maybe financial domain, you may want to fine-tune that model. So what you can do is you can pick the existing foundation model, pass some of your internal data with the outcome that you expect, and you feed into that existing foundation model so that it can learn from it. And with that, let me hand it over to Rana, where he will talk about some of the industry use cases. Yep.
Excellent. All right. How many of you are working for a company that has more than 1,000 employees? Great. How many of you are working for a startup company? All right, quite a few of you. So there are hundreds of companies out there of all different sizes where people are excited about generative AI. They're playing with it like almost every other day. They know how important it is, but they're not quite sure how to apply that technology in their own business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some real-world use cases and how some of our own AWS customers are using this technology to unleash some pretty compelling new business opportunities. And my goal here is to generate some ideas in your own mind, spark some ideas about how you might be able to use this technology in your own business. All right? Sound good? All right, let's get started. How many of you are in the healthcare and life sciences industry? All right. Well, I know a lot of doctors, but I don't know a single doctor who's told me, hey, Rana, I want to spend more time working on my paperwork, right? There's not a single doctor who says, I want to spend more time on paperwork. So what can we do to reduce the time that doctors spend on paperwork? Well, we all know, right, that when patients come up to talk to doctors, the doctor can record that conversation, and they can speak into a dictaphone, and then they can get a medical transcription, right, out of that interaction. And I've seen where they print out that transcription and they stick it in the patient's chart, and that's the end of it, right? Well, what if we can take that a step further? What if a Gen AI system can look at that medical transcript and extract out of it the chief complaint that the patient had? What are the medications that the patient is on? What's the treatment plan? So if a Gen AI system can do that, right, now they've suddenly saved a lot of labor on behalf of all the doctors because they've taken this unstructured conversation between the doctor and the patient and converted it into a structured record with all the fields filled out so that now that record can automatically go and update the EHR, the electronic health record, for the patient, right? Without a lot of manual scrutiny of what happened. So the good news is that, we don't have to say what if anymore, because that technology exists right now. We now have a service called AWS Health Scribe. You can send it a recording of the doctor-patient conversation, and it's a free-flow conversation, right? And it will use Gen AI to capture some of these essential elements of that conversation, the chief complaint, prescription medications, treatment plan, all that. And I'll show you an example of how that's done. Now, another area where Gen AI excels is not just in extracting information from documents. Another area is summarization. And this is, again, important in healthcare. So let's say you have a patient who has spent a week in a hospital. That stay is going to generate pages and pages of clinical notes, right? The patient has been in an OR and what's happened after the OR. But when the patient gets discharged, then the hospital has to generate a one-page discharge report, right? So that's a manual process. That discharge report is going to tell the patient, okay, here's the medication you should be continuing, here's the diet that you should be, working on, and things like that. But it's kind of a manual process to generate that discharge report after all that 7-day hospital stay, pages and pages of documentation. But now we have Gen AI systems looking through those pages and pages of clinical notes during that patient's hospital stay and able to actually generate and summarize a one-page discharge report. Imagine how much labor that's going to save all these hospital systems. And if you're in the business of supplying software for clinics or hospitals, both of the two use cases that I just talked about are going to save a ton of hours and therefore, going to be very compelling new business opportunities, right? A third area, by the way, is in drug discovery. So we're now seeing a whole lot of biopharmaceutical companies using Gen AI to actually accelerate the development of new drugs. And how can it do that? Well, that's because Gen AI has been trained on molecular structures that have led to effective medications in the past, right? Effective drugs in the past. So therefore, the Gen AI knows the chemistry, knows the molecular structure, so it can kind of help biopharmaceuticals discover new drugs and accelerate that process, because the candidates that they're going to go through are more likely to be effective in treating disorders and things like that, right? So some very, very exciting developments are happening now in the area of healthcare and Gen AI. Now, another industry where Gen AI is adding a lot of positive value is financial services. How many of you are in the financial services industry, like banks and mutual funds, asset management? Okay, quite a few of you. So you can imagine that insurance companies and banks and so on, they normally have a customer-facing chatbot of some sort, right? It does customer care. People can interact and ask questions about their account and things like that. But those chatbots are pretty rigid. There's not a whole lot of questions that they can answer, right? But now with Gen AI, we're actually looking at chatbots that are so intelligent that they can help take you through an entire mortgage loan application process where you can ask all kinds of tangential questions, right? And it'll still help you complete that mortgage application on its own, right? With very minimal interaction with the loan officer. So for example, with a traditional chatbot, you might be applying for a mortgage and it'll be quite rigid. It'll ask you, okay, how much do you want, income and things like that, right? But it can't answer questions out of left field. Like, the user might suddenly say, can you explain what are arms? What is an arm? How does that work, right? Or, hey, why do you need my credit score? They can basically ask all kinds of off-the-cuff questions while they're interacting with the chatbot, which a traditional, rigid, programmed chatbot cannot, but a Gen AI chatbot can. Why? Because the Gen AI chatbot has a partner, which is a foundation model. And the foundation model can answer questions like, why do you need my credit score? It'll be very patient. They'll say, well, the reason we need your credit score is such and such. And oh, by the way, you can go get your credit score by talking to Experian, or one of the credit bureaus, right? So what I'm saying is that these Gen AI-enabled chatbots enabled free-ranging conversations, tangential questions that will come up in these processes and do a pretty good job of answering them, right? You haven't programmed it to do that, but it can answer those kinds of questions. Another area, retail e-commerce with websites being powered by Gen AI. We now have virtual try-ons going on. People might be reluctant to buy a pair of sunglasses or to try on some shoes because they're looking at something on a website. But Gen AI can take a picture of your face, superimpose the sunglasses on it, and show you how you'd look with those shades. And that removes a barrier to you buying those sunglasses. This is not some pie-in-the-sky stuff. This exists right now. The Amazon retail store has virtual try-ons with sunglasses, shoes, right, and things like that. I'm just scratching the surface here. Every industry is going to be impacted by Gen AI. You talk about advertising and marketing. I'm going to talk about a use case in advertising and marketing soon. Travel, right, booking all your travel, things like that. You can imagine that any industry out there, this slide is not big enough to capture every industry that's going to be positively impacted by Gen AI. I mentioned what HealthScribe was doing, and here's an example. If you go into the HealthScribe console and you give it an audio recording of the doctor interacting with the patient, You got that conversation going on the left-hand side. Hey, John, how are you? Oh, well, Doc, I don't feel so good. I think I have some chest pains. And it's just a free-flowing conversation here, right, that got transcribed. You give that to HealthScribe. HealthScribe is going to come up with this structured record, right, that you see here. Okay, the chief complaint is the chest pain. The history of the patient illness is such and such. Here's the assessment. Here's the treatment plan, right? It basically took this free-flowing conversation between doctor and patient and came up with a structured health record that can automatically update the EHR. So if you're in the business of providing software for clinicians, I think this is kind of a game changer. Okay. Here's a use case that I think is going to be broadly applicable to just about every industry that's out there. And this is a use case that we call conversational document search. What this means is that you have a repository. Almost every company has a repository of hundreds or even thousands of documents that they're storing in their internal knowledge base, their wikis, their SharePoints, their Confluence, whatever, right? These are documents that could be, hey, these are, here are our training materials. Here's how we onboard new employees. Here's some assets for our sales teams to use. Here's our financial statements for the last few quarters. Every company has these troves of documents that they store internally. Well, what if you could now easily build a question-answer system that actually can carry on a human-like conversation about all the information that you've got in your documents, right? Well, that's exactly what GenAI enables. I'm actually going to show you that there are examples here where you can quickly build a chatbot like this, right, that then goes into your documents. And here's an example where a company has stored all the SEC filings of public companies that are out there, right? And so any of their employees can ask, what was the unearned revenue for Amazon in the year 2022? And the chatbot can come back and give you the answer. That by itself is not that impressive. Okay, I'm giving you a one-word answer. But the open-endedness of this is pretty amazing because they can actually ask, what on earth is unearned revenue anyway, right? It'll give you the answer. But more than that, let's say now that I want to send an email to my colleague Jane about this unearned revenue. Well, all you got to do is say, draft me a concise email about this unearned revenue to Jane. And out comes this very nice email. Dear Jane, I wanted to provide you with an update on Amazon's unearned revenue, right? And then you click send, and there you go. Very rich chat experiences where it's also generating the text for you to take the next step, right? So I think this is going to be a very broad-based use case, and we can help you build these things pretty quickly. Okay, speaking of financial services companies, one of our biggest, one of our customers is one of the biggest hedge funds in the world, I think, right now. It's Bridgewater Associates, and they have, last I checked, they have $100 billion or more under management. In any case, they have scores of investment analysts, and what the company noticed is that these investment analysts were taking too long doing manual tasks, okay? By the way, this is something that's going to be common throughout. When you're thinking about what you can do to deliver value for your customers, think first about all the manual tasks that they're doing, right? Think about automating those tasks. If you can automate those tasks, you've built something of a high degree of value, right? This is something that people are going to want to pay you for, right? It looks easy to you, it looks hard to them, right? Something that looks easy, that looks hard to them, yeah, they're going to pay you for these kinds of things. So with the problem that they saw was that their analysts were spending too much time on manual tasks. And what are some of these manual tasks? These are things like, well, if you're an investment analyst, you're often going to be asked to come up with a valuation model for a company. How do I value a company like Amazon? And that model, normally it uses something called discounted cash flow, DCF analysis. And so you have to write some code, right, to actually get the output of a DCF. So they were actually having to write a bunch of this code manually. And they're also, creating charts and graphs manually as well. So what they did is they took Amazon Bedrock, which is our Gen AI service, and they took Claude, which is the foundation model, one of the foundation models behind it, and they built this virtual investment analyst assistant, right? So now what can this virtual assistant do? Well, one of their human analysts can just type in instructions in English. Build me a financial model to value Amazon, right? And it just goes ahead and generates some Python code for that model. It doesn't matter what financial model you want. You can be trying to forecast earnings for a company for the next quarter. Well, that's another financial model, another set of Python code. Again, rather than writing that Python code manually, the Gen AI system can actually produce that for you. Another area where Gen AI really excels is producing code, as Mitesh said. With Code Whisperer, right, you can just type in a comment, and it'll actually generate the code for you. Okay, advertising and marketing. This industry is absolutely going to be impacted positively with Gen AI. How many of you are working in marketing and sales, and you are wanting to improve the open rate of your outbound emails for your marketing campaigns, right? If you're working in marketing, I mean, just about everybody has encountered a situation where the campaign isn't living up to, what you want it to be in terms of how many people are engaging with you. So here's where, let's imagine that you are a marketing manager in a company that sells athletic shoes, right? So what I did is I went into Bedrock and I went into a playground in Bedrock. With a playground, you can just type anything you want just to play with it, right? So I said, draft for me a marketing email that describes a limited time offer to buy our running shoes, okay? And out comes this, this marketing email, and it's pretty compelling. I mean, it says, we're having a flash sale with a 50% discount, and it's only for the next 24 hours. And oh, by the way, these shoes have breathable mesh uppers, they have plush memory foam midsoles, and they have durable rubber outsoles, right? I look at this and I go, whoa, hey, this might be something I want to go buy, right? But the interesting thing about this is that nowhere in my prompt did I say that my sale was going to be 24 hours or how long it was going to be. Nowhere in my prompt did I describe what my shoes' properties were at all. And yet, Bedrock, with this Claude model in the playground, gave me all this text. And the reason why it can do this is because it's been trained on marketing emails that have elicited a good response in the past, right? So it's learned what marketing emails have elicited a good response, has that knowledge, and can generate things like this for you, right? So try something like this out and see, what kinds of marketing and advertising copy you can generate. Okay, back to the world of big pharma. Merck, nobody needs an introduction to that company. They're a research-intensive biopharmaceutical. They started using Bedrock for knowledge mining and market research. And what is knowledge mining? It's just taking, terabytes and terabytes of information that you've collected over the years and using machine learning to try to gain some insights into that data. So in this particular case, they've collected all this data about how their prescription medications have been dispensed and what was the point in time at which the patient started taking it and what was the journey and so on. So they collected all this data. They integrated it with their patient workflows. So essentially, they got some knowledge insights from Bedrock. They integrated it with their patient workflows. And we actually heard from their director of data science who said that by integrating the patient insights that they got from Bedrock with their workflows, they're actually able to improve the lives of patients, right? That, I think, is a significant outcome, to be able to make a difference in the lives of patients. This is a great example of how Gen AI, right, is changing the world for the better. Let's go to Salesforce. Salesforce, of course, everyone knows, is one of the biggest software as a service companies out there. What they have built using Bedrock and GenAI, they've built something called Salesforce Data Cloud. And let me tell you what this does. If you've got a website, an e-commerce site, that's powered by Salesforce Data Cloud, then you can capture when customers are coming to the site and know whether or not this customer has a high propensity to buy or not. So here's how it's working. You have this prospective buyer that's shown on the left-hand side here. And you know something about this buyer. You know their previous buying patterns and things like that, right? So the Salesforce Data Cloud can calculate a propensity to buy score, right, based on what it knows about the customer's past buying behavior. And then what it does is, if the customer has a high propensity to buy, then that interaction goes into Amazon Bedrock. And Bedrock then generates an email that a sales rep can send right back to the customer. So what's going on here is that with the Salesforce Data Cloud and Bedrock and generative AI, we're actually enable customer outreach, because we are now engaging with the customer at the exact point that they are expressing interest in our products. And we're not wasting our time because we know that this customer has a high propensity to buy. Our machine learning model gave us that, right? So now, because of the fact that the sales rep and the prospective buyer are in, an email has already been sent, now we can have questions and answers, what is this product and things like that, and you've got some engagement going on, right? Okay, another compelling use case, I think, for GenAI. So, I've talked about Bedrock quite a few times here. So I want to get a little bit deeper into Bedrock and talk to you about what's going on underneath the hood there. So why did we build Bedrock? We built Bedrock because we wanted our customers to have the easiest possible way of interacting with our foundation models to build GenAI applications. So that means that you do not have to be a machine learning expert by any means, right? We have playgrounds where you can just type stuff in and you can see what happens. And even if you're programming and you're trying to build something, you just need a few lines of code to actually send a prompt into a model and get the answer back. So there's no need for you to launch machine learning instances, manage them, right? It's just foundation models that are accessible on demand. It's completely serverless, and it's a pay-as-you-go service, right? That's why we built Bedrock. So it's quite easy. How do you use it? Well, just choose from one of the leading foundation models, as shown here. And then the next step is, if you want, you can customize it with your own data, right? Sometimes you don't even have to. Sometimes the model is so good that you're good to run with it. But oftentimes you want to customize it with your own data. Beyond that, sometimes you actually want to automate some workflows. Now we're going beyond question answering. Let's say you're in the travel business. Somebody asks you to generate a 10-day itinerary through Europe. And GenAI is really good at that. It's going to give you a whole travel plan with all the cities and the highlights and. But do you want to stop there if you're in a travel business? No. The next thing they want to do is they want to book all that travel, right? One of our customers is Booking.com, right? And they're actually using GenAI. So if you want to go beyond chatting and doing workflows, you got to have agents. And I'm going to talk about agents for Bedrock. I think that's a very exciting new service that's going to automate a lot of manual workflows and have GenAI help that process. Okay? All right. So these are some of the foundation models that underlie Bedrock. And you can see that there's actually 6 of them. So we at AWS believe in you having the broadest possible choice, right, in terms of being able to use AI models. So that's why there's 6 of them out there. If you want to generate images, you've all seen the thing where there's an astronaut on a horse on the moon or something. And if you want to do something like that, you can use stability.ai, which is shown here, in the bottom. But if you want to just deal with text, then we've got these other 5 large language models, and 4 of them are supplied by our partner, Anthropic, which with their Claude model, AI21 Labs, which is really good with foreign languages, by the way. If you're dealing with foreign languages, go with the AI21 Labs Jurassic. We have Cohere, we have Meta's Llama 2, and of course we have our own large language model, which is called Amazon Titan. So how do you choose among these? I would say try them all. Send your prompts into them and look at your business case. Pick the one that solves your business case the best. Right? They all have different cost models as well. Okay. Now, I talked about agents. So here's what an agent can do. Let's say that you're in the insurance business. And oftentimes what happens is that someone submits a claim, but they didn't submit the photo, the damage, right? So you can quickly build an agent that actually reminds people, hey, you never sent your damage photos for your car accident claim, right? And you can do that with 1 sentence. And the agent comes back and says, okay, there's two claims, and these are the one, oh, and I have sent email reminders to all of them. So this is powered by agents for Bedrock. And to build an agent for Bedrock, it's not that hard. You select your foundation model. You just describe what the agent is doing. Okay, this is an insurance agent, right? It can find claims. It can send reminder emails. Write a few Lambda functions that can invoke those actions and describe what they are. Just describe everything in English. That's all you got to do. The Gen AI, the Bedrock, the agents for Bedrock can figure out what set of API calls to call in sequence to automate your workflow. You're not writing all this code, right, to go through the workflow itself. You're just describing what the APIs do, and the agent will figure out what to call in what sequence. That's pretty powerful stuff. This is what we call low code automation, right? Yeah, there is some code. It's not like there's 0, but you don't need to hire an army of developers to do stuff like this. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so we've talked about how companies are using AI ML. Hopefully, I've been able to spark some ideas as to how you can use it in your business. Start with your customer and identify the opportunities, right? Use your data as a differentiator. You've got some proprietary knowledge base. Use that to differentiate yourself from everybody else. And every one of your business units can benefit from Gen AI. It could be your HR department, accounting department, marketing department, doesn't matter. Every one of them can benefit. And I would say, talk to us. Talk to your account team. We'll help you on your journey towards adopting AI ML. We'll give you some demos. We'll help you go forward. And the last thing is the treasure hunt, right? Okay, the secret word is innovation, okay? The secret word is innovation. If you take a picture of this QR code, it'll give you the instructions of how you can participate in this game, and hopefully you win some prizes, all right? I'll give everybody a chance to click on this and capture this. And thank you very much. And please don't forget to complete the session survey that's in your mobile app. Thank you very much for your time.